Yeah, good morning to you, Leon. How's it going this morning?
Good morning, Shane. Very good, thanks, and you?
Yeah, good, thanks, man. Okay, so folks, Leon is the technical director for Data Prime, and he is the, I'm going to say creator, because author doesn't sound right. He's actually created this thing called RAC, and it is unbelievably sophisticated and powerful. I teach Excel to an advanced level, as some of you will know, and I've had some discussions with Leon where he just makes my head spin, and yeah, it's really comprehensive. And so, Leon, without much further ado, can I hand over to you?
Cheers, Shane. And good morning again to everybody who's just joined. Just a couple of general things in terms of RAC. Firstly, some of you may be existing users of RAC, some of you may be new or looking into RAC. So I'm hoping to be quite comprehensive in what I do in the RAC training over the next 8 weeks. So some of it is going to be a repeat, but I'm hoping that for most there are going to be a few aha moments where you see, oh, okay, that's how it's supposed to be going. So I've actually got 4 RAC files ready, and I'm going to be switching between them during the course of the presentation this morning. So when I switch, you're probably going to see something like this happening. It's going to briefly flash something slightly different in your screens before it updates to the next screen. And the reason for that is within RAC, we've actually built 4 different sized methodologies into our one audit methodology. And I want to go through and show you step by step what the differences are between these methodologies, so that when it comes to choosing which is the best for you to use in your audit, you know and have an idea of what differences you're going to see along the way, so that you can make that decision, an informed one. Firstly, just to start out the layout of the file, I've already imported a trial balance and such into these files, so I'm not going to go through that process or even creating the file. What you need to be aware of in terms of the RAC layout is where things start, and today's session is going to be on all these working papers in section 10, which is our engagement and team setup. Now, theoretically, before you can commence any audit, you should have already done engagement, acceptance, and continuance procedures. However, I know in practice it's sometimes difficult to get those things done without actually having a file. So maybe on the one hand, we're assuming you're already going to be accepting this client, and then you fill in this engagement, acceptance, and continuance, but then at least you can document those steps that you took before you commenced with the audit. So it's a bit of a mix and match, and we need to go and decide on materiality so that we can actually choose the audit sections. But in general, this is where you're going to start on any engagement, and that is in section 10. We will commence next week with a planning phase. You would then move down through the file. Eventually you'd have audit programs, and the finalization section is actually 00 to 09. Part of the reason for that is you probably want your final set of financial statements to be the very first document in your file at the end of the day. So that would usually, you'd number it like a 00.10 or 00.05. So that it's right on top of your audit file at the end of the day, and then your prior financials and stuff. So we've actually only started numbering from 02 in the finalization. That gives you scope to use 00 and 01 in any way that you would like to within your firm. Now I'm going to open up 10.00, and as I do that, I'm going to be opening it up on one of my other copies of the file here as well. When you open up any RAC document, one of the first things you should be seeing is a guidance sheet. And here is a very good example in 10.00. Now the first thing it's going to do is it's going to indicate to you exactly which ISAs are being addressed by this working paper, and where it's more than just the ISAs, as is the case here, the ISQC1 paragraphs that this particular document addresses. It'll then go through an objective. In this case, there's some explanation of concept. In other working papers, it goes through what we call actions, action 1, 2, 3, 4, those things that you need to do within the file. So it's going to give you firstly the theoretical background, but I don't copy and paste the ISA documentation, that is there for you to go and look up, and you know where to look the various information up. The guidance generally is supposed to be a more hands-on how-to approach, so that will be described in the guidance sheet. Why? Please go and read the ISAs. Now, this document happens to be one where we do actually pull in quite a bit of theory, and that specifically relates to the PRS score considerations, a number of items from the Psycho Companies Act Guide. Now, we've included this because the PRS score is a very important calculation to make. Once again, there's an assumption that you have already decided that you are going to audit this client, but we still have a PRS score calculation built into this engagement acceptance document, so that once again you can document the reasoning behind why you've ended up with an audit, even though your PRS score might be low. So as we go through the document, we'll just go through the ins and outs of that. Then if we go into the first sheet, I just want to switch over to my Medium client, and we can go and have a look at this sheet. Now, the first question here is asking about whether this is a new or continuing engagement. I just want to delete the answer in there quickly so that you can have a look, and I want to cover what colors mean within Draftworx. So you will see initially, when you open up for the first time, you'll actually see that this grouping is open. But what we have found is that because we have these headings in a lot of working papers, and we have a frozen pane, it's like the freeze panes in Excel as well, so that as you scroll, you can always see the heading, that starts creating and using up a lot of real estate on your screen. So most of, if not all, of the headings, or shall I say the document headers, are actually sitting in a grouping that you can close to enable you to open up more real estate on your working paper. Depending on your screen layout, I generally don't need that, but I work on a 27-inch full HD screen, so I've got a lot of space to see stuff. But if you're sitting in one of the older laptops, you've still got a smaller resolution on your screen, you're going to need more space. On top of that, if you need even more, you can also hide the ribbon bar within Draftworx, and simply double-clicking on the formatting or in any one of these headings will close that ribbon bar. You can still access it, so if you click on it, it does open the ribbon bar and you can make the necessary selections. Or if you want to put it back permanently, you don't need to reinstall Draftworx to do it. Just double click and it will reopen that ribbon bar for you. So this is just all about real estate on your screen, how to go about things. And then the colors, you will see that the header has always got this blue highlighting. It's a slightly darker blue. Later on you'll see some light blue, and that's just to distinguish it from the rest. The copyright notice is only found on 10.00, but the copyright stands for the entire methodology. The grey areas are just to indicate where there are questions, and the slightly darker grey to give an indication of just maybe some more prominent headings in your working paper. And then this first question you'll see at the moment is sitting in yellow. All the yellow cells indicate some form of compulsory or necessary input that we need from the user. Now in this case, the question is about whether this is a new or continuing engagement. And I need to know that because the next document in the file, 10.01, is a predecessor auditor review. And you only need to do that if it's a new engagement. If it's a continuing engagement, I actually switch that off. And I'll show you what happens when I do that in a few moments. Then the green cells are where we're expecting some sort of user input. It may not be compulsory. You might just want to put a not applicable, but it's just to give you an indication of where you should be completing information. You will see as well, if I scroll down a little bit further on this working paper, see if it just also, you'll see that there are some white cells that pop up. Now this is calculated information, but it doesn't require a user input. Before I did the EQCR evaluation, and we'll have a look at that in a moment, this cell was yellow because there needed to be some user interaction with a cell to actually go and decide whether or not we're going to be doing an EQCR. So that you would then follow the hyperlink, do the documentation, and you come back and the cell is white. So it's not something you've entered in there. There's a formula there, but it is calculated based on other values within the file. Okay. You will also see later on in the file there are red cells. Now the red cells indicate some form of an error or a problem with the selections that you've made. So for instance, if you've said yes to an assertion where you shouldn't have said yes, it'll come in red to show you that this is actually wrong. You have to do something now, otherwise there's an error that's going to carry through the file. And you'll also see later on some light blue cells, and I'm just going to highlight one of these cells in the light blue so that you can see this distinction. I'm not sure how clearly it's going to come through on the webinar, but there is a slight difference between this pale green and the pale blue. The pale blue specifically relates to what we call roll forward cells. We're not going to see any of those today, we'll only see them next week. But these cells you will often find have a fairly complex formula sitting in them already, but that's okay. That formula is trying to carry over last year's information from the database into this year for you. If you are doing RAC for the first time on a client, you won't see anything in here, it'll be blank. And that indicates that there's nothing to roll forward from the previous year. But if you do see those blue cells, it is worth completing them comprehensively, because this information will then roll forward to the next financial year, which is going to make your audit next year a whole lot easier. The way we've designed RAC, even if we do template updates, changes to the working papers, when you roll forward, we pull in the absolute latest templates for you so that you have the latest information available and the latest questions, the latest updates available in your new file, but we are able to maintain the information integrity anyway. It's not a conversion process, so it's not a half-hour process to try and update the file. It's instant because of the way we've written the formulas. It just dumps the new working paper templates in, and the information is already available and inserted there for you. All right, so that is just a general idea. Sorry, one other thing I want to point out is you will see that there is no formula bar. Now, the formula bar is still available. We've just chosen to switch it off for RAC. It can be switched back on. The problem is that a lot of people were seeing these strange formulas in various cells and thinking they can't insert values in there, and we didn't want that to become a hindrance to completing information correctly. Even if there is a formula, very often if it's a green or a blue cell, you can actually go and complete information. That formula is more about trying to pull information from the previous year forward than about anything that it's trying to extract from the file in the current year. So we've just hidden that formula bar to make life a little bit easier. However, if you do need the formula bar for any workings, or if you want to check your content on the cell, you can go to the View tab and you will see that there is a formula bar option. At the moment it's highlighted. You actually need to click it twice to implement the formula bar or bring the formula bar in. I'm just going to use the highlighting tool to show you where that formula bar is sitting in case you've missed it. And I'm now going to go and click it twice. Okay, and then my formula bar has returned. Okay. So at the moment in this working paper there aren't really any formulas sitting in any of these cells, but if you do need that formula bar for any reason, that's where you can go and put it on and off if you're no longer needing it. Although when you reopen a file, it'll automatically default back to being switched off. Okay, so that is a general overview of what we're going to be seeing in RAC and the different working papers. I now want to start going through 10.00 and the sort of content and information that we're going to want in here. All right, so as I said already, the first question here is about whether this is a new or continuing engagement. I'm going to select a continuing engagement here. The reason for that is I've got another one set as a new engagement, and I just want to show you what difference that is going to make. Now, the next cell, it asks for initials and date, and there's actually a nice little shortcut bar. I'll scroll down on the right-hand side here in a moment, and you'll see that there is a sign-off option available. Initials and date. Let's just highlight that for you there again. That's where I can go and insert my initials and date, and as soon as I've selected the cell, select initials and date, it puts in my initials and the date for me. So you don't need to go and type that in every time. You can then copy and paste this or just use it in subsequent documents. Okay. Just also want to show you, if you do say new engagement, you'll see that it automatically puts a hyperlink in for you to 10.01, which is where we do this predecessor auditor review. but I'll come to that when we get to that document. The rest of the questions, pretty standard. The next one is actually just asking you if it's a component audit that you're doing or if you're the sole auditor of this client. I'm going to select sole. It doesn't actually make it any impact to the file in general. It's just for information purposes. And then it asks the next question, are there any changes in the terms of reference for this client? Now I want you to see, I'm going to say yes here to indicate that there was a change in the terms of reference. And I want you to watch the cell below. Okay, that should, if the updating doesn't take too long, as soon as I say yes, it changes to green. So we've suddenly created a new user input cell where you now need to go and give information based on the answer that you've just given. So you will see colors change within RAC as you work through things, and you would now need to go and document these changes. All right, and it stays green, and then you can see as a reviewer that you need to review the content of that cell. Then it asks in the next cell, any independence issues or conflicts of interest. In reality, what I should do now is hit the hyperlink, go to 10.02, and I complete the firm independence review, but we'll get to that document in a moment. You select your response, put the initials and date. I'm not going to go through all the questions in detail, but you will see that there are some hyperlinks available. And then we get to question 11, which asks about the EQCR. Now I've already completed that section of the document. Normally the cell would be highlighted in yellow, but to go and decide on the EQCR, I would just click on the hyperlink. I just want to flick over to one of my other sheets here. Alright, now I'm going to follow the hyperlink and go to 10.00.03, which is actually part of the same working paper, just on a different sheet. Now here it goes and lists the EQCR requirements. Okay, but please note that the 3 criteria listed below these are examples. These are not necessarily what your firm's requirements are. It is necessary for you to go through your firm's own risk manual or quality control manual, whatever it may be called in your firm, and you need to go and put your criteria in for what constitutes a need for the EQCR. I did some training a little while ago. We talk here about, is the Prs score above 350? That's just an example. Your firm could be saying 1,000. There's not a right and wrong, but this needs to be in accordance with your own firm. So please make sure that this information is updated based on your requirements. We will be working on a little template in the near future which will allow this to be pre-populated a little bit easier when you open your clients going forward. Now what we've done in this case, we've gone and said that yes, one of these criteria is applicable, but I've still gone and said that an EQCR is not required. However, in Action 3, you will say an EQCR should be performed for this engagement. Make arrangements with the quality control partner for a timely EQCR to be performed. But then I say an EQCR is not required, and it still remains with this yellow highlighted cell for me, which is indicating to me, please give a detailed indication of why no EQCR is performed, where the above indicators indicate the need for one. So we've said yes, but we've said no, there's no EQCR. So there you need to go and document in detail why you're doing this, if you choose to do so. However, what should be happening is you should in this cell be saying an EQCR is to be performed. And then that yellow cell goes away, it's left white, there's no content, and you know that you've made the appropriate selection. Okay, now let's go and have a look at the Prs score. Also a sheet, and you could follow the hyperlink from the first engagement control document. The Prs score, as I said, you've probably calculated this beforehand, but now you can go and document it within this file because we do actually use the Prs score in our sampling methodology. But what I want to show you is that in this case I haven't completed all the cells for the numbers. I've left one blank, and it actually is still showing to me that my Prs score is 0. The reason we've done that is that we don't want a false figure to generated. So until all the values are completed, we actually say 0, so that it rings out as I'm missing something here. We don't want you to forget to put the number of employees because you don't have the value, and then you continue with the audit and you come back and see, oh, hang on, I forgot to put employees in. There are actually 1,000 employees. I've got the wrong PIS score. So it's just a little control that we've put in place that requires all content to be completed before you can continue. Okay, let's go and put a 10 in there. I end up with a PIS score of 560. All right. Now, just a quick comment maybe on CCs. Trying to remember if we do have the option here of a closed corporation. But recent guidance just around CCs has been pointing towards the fact that if a CC does not need an audit, it doesn't actually need a review either, even if this document goes and indicates that the CC may require a review. It's just in the CICA guide that they released recently. That's the current opinion around CCs. I know it just could cause a lot of confusion, but if you are sitting with a lot of CCs and they're not requiring an audit, but they're coming up as a review, maybe just go and review that CICA documentation to go and confirm that you don't actually need to do a review for them either. So in that case, you probably don't need to be using RAC. RAC at the moment is only for audits, except in such a case where the bank or the client has voluntarily decided to go for a full audit. Okay, then we get a number of engagement considerations, and you'll see that there are a couple of not applicables in these questions. What we try and do, based on the answers that you've put above, we try and as soon as possible make any of these not applicable for you. So the question over here was about whether the entity is a non-profit company. Because we said it was a private company, obviously it's not a non-profit company, so we make this not applicable. So that you don't need to go and answer questions that you don't really need. Sorry, and I also missed, there is guidance here. You will see that there are a number of guidance hyperlinks, and these take you back to the guidance sheet into the exact location where we discuss each of these things from the CICA guide. Okay, I'm going to scroll a little bit further down, and this is where we now assess whether or not an audit is required. And if any one of these questions comes out with a yes, an audit is required. If you're not ending up with a yes over here somewhere, then in fact we don't need RAC because it's not an audit, because this also includes a voluntary audit. Okay. There is also a questionnaire or some answers that look whether or not the independent review exemption applies. All three of these have to be yes before that independent review exemption can apply. And it also goes and assesses whether or not Section 92B of the Companies Act is applicable. And as soon as one of these questions comes out with a yes, then Section 92B does apply. So in this case, it just does tell you there, Section 92B must be applied to this entity. Please include a statement in the file to confirm that your firm is not involved in the compilation of the financial statements. So it's a little rider and a little reminder to you there that you should not be using Section 90. What this does at the end of the day, if I go back to the first document, it goes and completes for me what is the PIS score, does Section 92B apply, and what is the nature of the procedures required, and it is an audit, and therefore RAC is appropriate to select, and we can continue with this engagement. The last and very important question here is, can the client continue to pay our fees? Hopefully the answer to that is yes. Otherwise we do need to consider our independence and why are we actually selecting this client. I'm just going to flip over back to my medium, because you will see that right at the bottom there are two brightly highlighted yellow cells, and this is asking for my partner conclusion and whether or not we actually accept or if we are declining this client. Partner conclusion, based on the above assessment, I'm willing to continue and I accept this client. Again, the assumption is that you probably wouldn't even have a RAC file if you got to the point where you said, I do not accept, but I do still want you as the user to go and complete that and document it to make sure that we don't miss something along the way. Okay, so that is 10.00. A lot of the questions in here should be fairly familiar. There's nothing too different hanging around in there, but just so that you can see in detail what to do specifically when we get to the PIS and the EQCR. I'm going to jump into 10.01, and this is the new engagement predecessor auditor review. Now in this medium file that I have here, all it tells me is that since this is a continuing engagement, the document is not applicable. So this comes back to what we answered in 10.00, where we said this is a continuing engagement and we need to go and in fact, because it's continuing, we don't need to look at last year's auditor because we were last year's auditor. However, clicking over to one of my other example files here, I'm also going to open up 10.01. And here you will see that there are questions in place. Now the questions here are asking things like who is the previous auditor, what were the reasons. Remember, we need to first get the client's permission to contact the predecessor auditors, and you will see that there is a rather large notice put in here. Prior to communicating with the predecessor auditors, either verbal or letters or email, ensure that you have the client's permission to contact the predecessor auditor. We can't just contact them on our own. If they refuse us access, we have to accept that we cannot contact the predecessor auditor, but we do have to question why that is the case. It could have an impact on whether or not we're actually going to accept that client. Now, if we have the permission, we go and ask the client, what do you say are the reasons you're changing auditor? We speak to the previous auditor, what do you say the reasons are? And we need to weigh that up in terms of whether or not we want to continue with this client. Okay, there are a number of questions reviewing emphasis on matters in the prior year, inquiries with the predecessor auditor. You'll see there's quite a lot of questions in place. And at the end of the day, as the engagement partner, we need to go and consider, based on my knowledge of the prospective client and any factors outlined above, this prospective client should be rated as, and it's giving me a risk profile. So if things are hunky-dory and the client, maybe they decided it was time to rotate and the previous auditor said there are no issues that they can identify that could have caused it, they're happy that it is just a rotation policy of the client, then you would say it's a low risk. Or if there are issues or conflicts or some major issues in the prior year audit report which may have led the client to change auditors, then we need to start increasing our risk profile for this client. So we make that determination. We then have a hyperlink to 10.02, which is asking about prohibitions on whether we can accept this client, specifically around our independence. And then there is a determination at the end of the day, should we accept the engagement or should we decline the engagement? Once again, the assumption is if we get to this point, we probably are going to accept the client. You would have done this determination beforehand, but if you hadn't, and this was the first time that you went through these sort of procedures and you get to this point that we're declining, then this is at least a good working paper to keep on file for yourself for future reference in case anybody comes back and asks you, well, why didn't we accept the client? Then you've got documentary evidence. Also, in this case, because we have said that there is an EQCR required, then there is the requirement for the second partner to also accept this engagement. Okay. All right, that's 10.01. Okay, once again, please indicate that you do accept the engagement if there is a second partner review. Okay, I've now just gone and clicked, I'm signed in as a partner. I've clicked on set as partner, and as soon as I do that, you'll see that it inserts my initials and date into this document as well. Some of our clients I know are trying to maintain a more electronic file, and this then gives you an easy way to put in an electronic signature with a partner sign-off, or if you are rather preferring manual, you can print out the document and then just sign off and put the date in manually on this document, depending on your preferences. Okay, I'm going to move on now to 10.02, which is the audit firm independence. Okay. Okay, the audit firm's independence, a fairly basic document, although it's a fairly important one to complete just to prove that you are independent of the client. So there's a long list of questions. I think there are 14 or 15 of them in total, and we're asking just for a yes or no answer. However, I want to point out that as soon as you say yes, for instance, I have financial interests in the client, it's immediately going to be asking you document reasons for the prohibition. Now, I know there are a lot of things sitting in the Code of Professional Conduct. I can still remember from my studying days, if it's part of a unit trust's investment, and therefore you don't really have control over the investment processes and whatever the case might be, but you need to go and document the reasons for that prohibition being in place and what steps you've actually taken to eliminate that threat. Once you've documented something, it goes green. Until you document something, it remains yellow, indicating there is some sort of a required input in the cell. If I say no, you'll see the cells remain white. I don't need to do anything further. Also, unfortunately, I cannot in a spreadsheet look for an intelligent answer. I can only look for an answer. So you can go and type ASDF, nice and quick and easy, and you think the yellow cell is gone. But if you are the reviewer, you'll very quickly pick up that there is a green cell. I do need to review it, so it is a user input that's happened here, but that's not an appropriate answer. Document is not an appropriate answer. You can also, if you wish, go and insert hyperlinks at any point in time. This is not necessarily the correct hyperlink to put in, but I'm just going to use the hyperlink to hyperlink this to 18.00. And you'll see very quick and easy, you can go and insert hyperlinks, import your own working papers, and that hyperlink sits there and the reviewer can go and click on the hyperlink and follow through to that document. Also, this document works as well if I do go and set this as partner reviewed. It does go and put my initials and the date in for me, or you can choose to sign it off manually if you want to print the file. Now I'm going to leave some of these exceptions in place. I just want to show you at the end of the day what documentation gets highlighted to you in other working papers, but just to show you on my other file what this should actually be looking like is you should have a long string of no's and you should have a lot of white cells. We're hoping that there are not too many yeses taking place. Otherwise, once again, the point of this is to go and confirm your independence. If you cannot confirm and prove that you're independent, it does question why you are accepting this client. Okay, that was pretty quick and easy. 10.02, that's the audit firm's independence. The next document is the individual team member's independence. Now, in the same way that we need to confirm as a firm that we are independent of the client, we also need to go and confirm that the individual team members are also independent of this client. And some of those questions are going to be similar to what we've seen in the previous document. However, I just want to point out the right answer has changed. If you were looking for the right answer in 10.02, no was the right answer, but in this document, yes is the right answer. So the question is asking integrity. I am straightforward and honest in my professional and business relationships. So obviously you want to say yes to that. So if we say no, we're going to be highlighting the items in yellow. Okay, just want to scroll down. This is pre-completed. Sorry, I just want to point out you need to put each individual team member's name, and you'll see that there are multiple sheets in place. We have up to 10 sheets available for 10 team members. They need to put in their name, what their position is. Now that could be position in the engagement, position in the firm. There is a spot for a personnel or an ID number. This is up to your firm what you want to insert into these cells. So just need to be consistent, I think, is the only real question there, is you do want to look for consistency. As we scroll down, the next question here is independence. Just looking at 6 and the sub-questions here, I have complied with the requirements. So when it asks about financial interests, it's asking me, have I complied with the requirements? Yes. Not do I have a financial interest? It's have I complied with the requirements in the application of the conceptual framework, and so on and so forth. Okay. Skipping over to, okay, it's in my other file. Let me go and have a look in there. I have a few team members in here. John Smith, I've picked on him. If there is a John Smith, watching. I'm terribly sorry. But what you will see here is there are a number of no answers, and in this case, as is the case with the firm independence, it's coming up with green and yellow cells just to mark for the reviewer where things need to be completed. Once again, hyperlinks are possible. But once again, I'm going to leave some of these exceptions in this file to show you what the output is at the end of the day. Okay, then the sign-offs are very important. In this case, I've left the sign-off blank, but to look at one of the earlier ones, there is a spot for you to go and insert your initials and date. Now, this does not work with the electronic sign-offs on the right-hand side. You do need to manually go and insert your initials and the date, and it does later report to me whether or not that has happened. I want to also point out that there is also a cell here for the at finalization of the audit. There is actually a requirement to come back after the audit and just confirm these questions once again. To confirm as an individual that throughout the audit I have still maintained my integrity, I have still maintained my independence of this client. I haven't suddenly bought 50% of the shares because I've suddenly seen, hang on, they're going to have a huge dividend payout and I want some of that money. We don't want to have insider trading with our clerks. Okay, so please take note of the finalization sign-off, and when we get to the finalization section, you will see that this pops up. All right, so the next document is 10.05. It's a very basic document, so I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on it. It's basically just confirming your competencies and independence for each of your team members. So once again, your team members' names are listed. We then just talk about their level, look at understanding, do they have a practical experience with audit engagements of a similar nature? And the reason for this is, remember, when we're starting an audit, we need to consider, before we accept the engagement, and that's why there's actually a hyperlink from 10.00 to this document, before we start the engagement, do we actually have the staff, the time, the competencies to go and do this audit? So if you suddenly want to accept a 10 billion turnover motor dealership and you've only ever audited mines, do we really have the skills and expertise to do this major jump from one entity type to another? Before we accept this client, we need to understand that. So that's what this questionnaire is all about. And yeah, also one of the future developments is we will pull the names in here from our individual team member independence in future, which will make life a little bit easier. It's all just new stuff that we are working on and developing in the background just to keep RAC up to date, shiny and pretty to use. So do look out for that coming in future. All right, so that's all I really want to say about 10.05. Then just to come back to the question that was asked a little bit earlier about multiple lines, and I just want to show you the formula bar as I type. If you do want to include multiple paragraphs, I can go in Document, and then I'm now pressing Shift-Alt-Enter, and you'll see that it hopefully can see that it's gone onto a new line. Alt-Shift-Enter, Enter. All right, so if you are wanting to include paragraphs in any documentation, that's the best way to do it. We prefer that to adding rows because that can cause some conflicts with some of the formulas. And we've actually disabled it in some of the RAC documents. You can't actually include or add additional rows. So if you do want paragraphs, please use that option. Or if the documentation is just going to get too much, please rather insert a hyperlink. That is the preferred method. All right. Okay, now I want to look at materiality. At the start, we have a setup. Okay, and the idea behind the setup is, firstly, we want to know what exactly we want to compare. So you're given a choice here of up to 3 different sets of figures that we can compare. And you'll see below here in Action 2, some of those figures are starting to stick out, such as my sales, my expenses, my gross margins, income after tax. That information is starting to populate in the bottom here. However, what do we want? Here I've got opening, prior 1, prior 2. Now we have a lot of clients who will import into Draftworx's opening balance, literally the opening balances at the beginning of financial year. Then they will import the transactions for each month because maybe they're doing monthly management accounts, but that option is available, and in that case you actually want to look at the final figure rather than the opening, and that's why we've created the option here to go and choose which base we want to use. So I'm going to go and click on final over here. Let's go and make that assumption that I need to use final. Okay, then this cell changes to final. Okay, so this is now the final figures. The other thing that has happened is that this cell here has gone a bright red. This question is asking which set of figures of these three do I actually want to use for my estimates. Okay, and at the moment it's still saying opening, so I need to update that, and that's why it's coming out red. If I don't, you will see further down, I just want to show you quickly, you actually end up with a whole lot of #NA errors sitting in the possible planning materiality cells here. And that's because I haven't made an appropriate determination above. So once again, this is where, for the first time, I think we're seeing this bright red come up. This is an error, we need to go and fix it. So I can go and click on final. Okay. The other thing that we are able to do automatically is extrapolation. So if you have a financial period that isn't a full 12 months, I'm going to go and change this and say, let's say we just had a 10-month trial balance that we're working with here. Go and use the drop down, and I'm going to go and select 10, and you'll see immediately that the sales have changed from 215 million to 258 million. And that's appropriate. If you've only got a portion of a year, you can extrapolate that in terms of trying to work out what my materiality is. However, we don't extrapolate the balance sheet items. We only extrapolate the income statement items. We can't say that because after 10 months we have 10 million PPE that after 12 months we'll have 12 million. It doesn't work on the balance sheet. It only works on the income statement. It's an estimate. At the end of the day, materiality is an estimate. You can also go and say, well, this financial year was 15 months rather than 12, so we actually, in terms of materiality, need to tone it down a little bit, and then it also reduces that now to 172 million. So that automatic extrapolation is built in. One of the other nice things you can do, I don't have it here, but you could be using an opening and an interim figure and a budget as your basis. I don't have those figures, but it'll automatically allow those comparisons because you can import all of these figures into Draftworx into separate columns. So now we have our bases. We go and take a look at our bases and we decide, yes, we are happy to use final. What is the broad nature of the entity? This is just to determine which sort of ranges of materiality we need to use. So I'm going to say this is profit orientated, and very importantly, please document, and this is where an audit file can fall over if you're not appropriately documenting your professional judgment, because this is a professional judgment call. At the end of the day, it's very hard for a reviewer to come around and say your professional judgment is wrong, because your professional judgment is based on you, your experience, your knowledge, what you've done. But if you don't document that professional judgment, it does give scope for a reviewer to come in and question. So please, again, go and document. Action 1 here now talks about who are the users of the financial information. Okay, this could be SARS, and let's be honest today, who's the major user of our financial statements? It is SARS and it is the bank. Those are the guys that really look at our financial statements. Many of the clients I've dealt with are actually, they don't know really what all the notes are all about. They just know they have to have this audit. They don't really like paying for it, but they know they need to get it. But the users are SARS. We need to submit SARS to SARS, our financial statements quite often. We need to submit to the bank. And for each of these, we need to go and consider what impact this is going to have on my materiality. Now, if the bank just uses the financials for an annual review of their facilities, it's not a major problem. The client is suddenly trying to take out a 50 million loan and the bank is going to base it on these financial statements. Well, that higher my risk profile of the client, and I maybe need to reduce my materiality. So go and document who those users are. You could maybe even include the CIPC. Nowadays, you should be submitting financials to the CIPC. And in the next year or two, that may even be via an electronic format called XBRL, which is going to make life very, very interesting, because SARS will also accept XBRL financials. Then we've had a look at the bases. Action 2, you can go and add your own. Please complete as necessary. And then in action 3, we actually go and choose what base we're now going to use. And this is where that profit-orientated came from. You can use another. The percentages pulled from the IFAC guide, but once again, please be aware that this needs to be in line with your firm's own policies. If your firm says 1 to 2% of revenue, then please stick to 1 to 2% of revenue. Don't go for 3%. All right, I am going to go for 3%. Just to show you, at the moment, I can't say 4. It does give me a validation error. Okay, we cannot go higher. 6.45 million is the possible materialities, but you'll see that the actual materiality figure here stays 1, irrespective of what I do here. Materiality is a judgment call. We're not going to make this judgment for you. Please go and make the call yourself. In this case, I would probably say about 6 million, and that's my materiality. Okay. I cannot say 7 million. Once again, I'm going to get a validation error because 7 million is greater than the maximum of these items. Okay, so you retry it. Let's go and make it 6 million again, and it'll accept it. Once again, please document reasons for your materiality. Show your professional judgment throughout the process. Action 4 allows you to go and specify a specific materiality. Let's go for argument's sake. In this case, we want a higher or lower materiality value for our total assets. Okay, I can go and say total assets are 1.2 million, and I can then pull that figure out elsewhere within my file. What we won't allow is a materiality higher than my overall materiality. Specific materiality has to always be lower, so please bear that in mind. And once again, we do put in validation rules to prevent inappropriate answers at this juncture. Okay, I'm going to leave that blank. I only want that 900,000 to use later on in the training when we get to sampling. The last action here is about my clearly trivial threshold. Now, I found some users are making use of this. Some users aren't actually implementing trivial thresholds. Just the theory behind a clearly trivial threshold is any error that I find within this audit which is under 60,000 Rand, I may still report this. So it's not that I'm not going to report it to the client, but I don't need to carry this on my shared summary of identified misstatements on my overs and unders schedule. So if I find a VAT error, let's say, of 59,000 Rand, I'm going to report it to the client because it is pretty important to let them know that this kind of error has happened. However, I don't need to put it on my overs and unders schedule. It can just be a reporting point that I carry through in my management accounts. So that's what the clearly trivial threshold is. It's basically there to prevent your audit clerks from finding 15-cent VAT errors and trying to put it on the overs and unders. We don't want these trivial amounts to cloud our reporting. We don't want to overthrow it with unnecessary stuff. We want to focus on the important figures, and that's why we say between 0.5 and 1% of materiality becomes this clearly trivial threshold where we're not worried about this adjustment for our overs and unders. Yeah, that's the distinction. It's for our overs and unders. And once again, we go and document our conclusions on this working paper.
Thanks, Leon. I've just paused the recording there for a sec. I have actually got a few questions.
Okay.
But, do you want to look at them now quickly? Is this a good time?
Yeah, let's maybe have a look at one or two, and then I can get to the rest of the documents.
All right. Okay, great. I think that one of the other things, just while I'm getting this already on my side, that I do want to just mention is there's one or two other polls that I'd like to run with you guys as well, and I'll find the gap for that a little later, and also just I didn't take everybody through the sort of the points that we're going to be covered today, Leon. I don't know if that's important or not. Not really.
Oh yeah, we'll maybe get to that.
Okay.
Later down the line. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, anyway, let me just, can you see the screen, the questions there? All
Yeah,
right, I'm
yeah.
going to hit the record button again.
Okay.
Thanks, Leon. Over to you.
All right, Warren, in terms of additional points, I'll demonstrate to you quickly in the next working paper. There are some working papers within RAC where, yes, you can go and add rows, but there are others that it is a little dangerous to do so. However, there is a nice little shortcut. If I remember correctly, it's Alt-Shift and Enter. As you're typing in a cell, actually goes and inserts it like a new paragraph within one particular cell so that you can create a paragraph layout. However, what we do recommend when working in RAC is if you start documenting too much in one particular cell, it can run away with you, and it does make printing and reviewing quite difficult. So in those cases, we would prefer actually going and inserting a new working paper, documenting it in detail there, and then going and inserting in a hyperlink. But I'll show you that in a moment. Then just with regards to initials and date being changed, the initials and date are actually set up within your setup of Draftworx. So when you install Draftworx on your computer, you put the initials and date in there, and that is then the initials, sorry, not the date, obviously the date is the current date. That inserts the initials based on the settings within Draftworx. So if something wrong is coming up in there, please hop onto remote support and we can quickly take you to those settings within Draftworx and we can show you where you can change those. And then the Prs Score, the difference between the one in the sheet, or sorry, in the tab that opens when you open up Draftworx and the one within the working paper is the one in the working papers within RAC is actually carried through to other locations within the file. The one that appears just when you open up Draftworx, when you open up a client, that's just got the Prs Score calculation and consideration of whether or not it's an audit. It doesn't include the Section 90 considerations, and the value that you get there doesn't actually pull through into the file. So the one that opens up just in Draftworx, and I'll quickly show everybody what I'm talking about in a moment, that's just for your use to quickly check what is the PIS. It's a nice way, you know, if you're busy considering a client, quickly do a PIS score calculation with them without having to open up a file and do anything. Quick and easy. But the one within 10.0002, that then carries through into the RAC file and helps you determine, for instance, sample size at a later stage. Okay. So yeah, Shane, let me then get going again. I want to continue with 10.05 if you can switch back over to me.
Thanks, Leon. I'm just doing that. Just two quick polls, if I may. First of all, just
okay, sure.
a bit of a, yeah? Can I just find out who the newbies, any newbie webinar folks today? If this is your first webinar, please just score that first one. If you've attended a few, I've also included another one where you've attended a few, but it might be your first webinar series. What I mean by that, well, this is going to be a very structured thing. You're going to basically be tuning in every Friday from 8:30 until 9:30 for 8 weeks, and so it's a series, if you know. It's like a movie, watching a movie series. And I'll just give you a few seconds to score on that one. And then just also while you scoring that, Walter, good to have you online. I'm sorry we haven't spoken for such a long time, but just to recap, RAC is available now. It's as 1,500 a license, and you can have as many as you like. Okay. So I think, Leon, we'll probably talk a little bit more about the sort of technical aspect, how guys can go about it. Or maybe I should just run a poll at the end if there are any, and we can do it during the sessions. Who would like to order RAC? Should I do it like that?
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Does that sound good? All right. Yeah. Thanks for the, and then just one more. This was also maybe just following on with what I've just been saying. Can we just get a bit of a sense for you guys, and I'm sorry, Leon, this is one of the polls I wanted to run before the session, but can you just give us some feedback, guys? Who's already using RAC? Who has bought it? Maybe you've bought it and you're not using it yet, so that's why you're participating today, is you want to just like see how this wonderful new piece of shiny software actually works. And if you're just looking, that's also fine. If you're just having a look-see and maybe you need some hours, I don't know, yeah, just let us know that too. And I'll just give you a few seconds. And Leon, I don't know if you're able to see the votes coming in there. I can tell you that
yes.
You've got 75% of the field have voted, and more than half are just looking. But there's a nice chunk of guys who are already using it. So there we go.
Awesome.
That's great.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Okay.
awesome. Okay, thanks, Leon. I think I've probably cut into your time. I'm very sorry, but yeah, I just want to confirm that we can see your screen. Yes, we can. And can I resume with the recording?
Yes, go for it. Go for it. Okay.
Thanks, Leon. Over to you. Cheers.
All right, thanks very much. Okay, I'm going to stop it there for this morning. I see it's now 9:28. I generally take a bit longer with section 10 than I anticipate, but there are a number of very important documents in here. We will be able to catch up next week. We'll finish 10:15 and 10:20, and we will be able to get through most of the planning stuff as well next week. So I don't want to drag it out unnecessarily. I know people have commitments and things to do, so I want to stop it there. So Shane, if you want to take it from there, I know you've got one or two more polls. Oh yes, and let's let us have a look at the questions.
I just show you those questions.
Yes.
You can leave them if you want, or maybe we could just say to guys, listen, if you need to jump out of the session, we'll send you a recording, and then maybe if you could just have a look at those and let me know what you want to do, Leon. And while you're doing that, I'm just saying, old Philip, who I know you know well from Zanin, I missed his response earlier. So he pointed out that Zanin is between where we are now.
How's it there, Philip?
You want to handle these now, and maybe guys can just stay on and watch if they're interested. Should we get like that?
Yeah, no, let's do that. So I'll run through these questions quickly, but as I say, I'm going to try and get the recording of this out as soon as today, even on YouTube, and we will email that through to all our sign-ups. So if you can't follow the answers to the questions now, then please look out for that. Oh gosh, Shane, you've taken my poll. You've gone to the poll. We'll come back to the questions. It's fine. Sorry, and I think you're a little far from the microphone there. I'm struggling to hear you.
Oh, I'm a little far from the microphone. Thanks for reminding me. Sorry,
Thanks.
Guys, if you're wanting to, this is just two things before Leon handles the questions. If I can ask you just before you run, we're giving guys who are based, they're already wanting to order. That's fine. Please go ahead. You can have as many licenses as you like, and they're 1,500 each per annum. Per license. Okay, it's like introductory special. I believe the price is going up to about 10 grand next week. Is that right, Leon? Something like that.
Special today.
Special today. Only today, 1.5 grand per license. So it's a steal, guys. So we're giving you a chance. Look, we will be running this poll again next week and the week after. So I'm just going to close that down. And then before you run, chaps, can we just have, we always want to just get a bit of a rating for our sessions. So was this a tops for you, or very interesting and helpful and okay and not great? And I'm going to ask you to vote very quickly, please, just so that I can close the poll and let Leon finish off. And those of you who've got to run, thanks, guys, for tuning in. Look forward to working with you again next week, same time, same place. And yeah, isn't it great to be able to work like this? We've got folks tuning in from all over, and all right, there we go. We've already nearly hit our 80% votes, which we always look for, Leon. I'm going to close the poll and hand back to you and hit the record button.
Awesome.
Thanks, Leon. Over to you.
Okay. All right, yeah, so Willem, I'm going to come back to the audit light versus RAC in a moment. I want to deal with that last. The independence working papers, if all staff and partners have not signed off the working papers, will RAC prevent proceeding with the audit. Now, there is something which we call strict adherence. Sorry, I was trying to remember the name there, which we have worked into the background of RAC, but we haven't fully implemented it yet. It's actually going to prevent you from moving on to the next section of the audit until various specific sign-offs have been done within RAC. Now, what that would be is, for instance, 10.25, which we didn't get to today, is a sign-off of the engagement setup section. Technically, if that strict adherence is set, the partner has got to confirm that he's happy with the status of the audit before Section 11 or anything else can be opened. However, we haven't fully implemented yet. We haven't made it compulsory yet because we've got a lot of users that are still getting used to RAC, and we don't want to overload them with unhelpful restrictions, which could further delay their audits. But what we do is these very important items we do report on. So It's reported in 10.25 that there are sign-offs missing, and it's reported in the finalization that there are sign-offs missing. So you can always keep track of where you are in terms of these items, just to make sure that something is not missed. Okay. Now, Walter, I'll deal with your question along with Willems. What is an interim for, and could you include a transactional one which uses opening and transactions including journals at some stage? Okay. Sholton, I think I do understand your question, but we do have an interim column. You can import an interim amount into Draftworx, and the point of that is where you are doing like a roll forward audit. So it's not year end yet, but you actually want to start working on the planning or actually going and doing some procedures. And in my audit career, we always earmarked some of our more high deadline insistent clients and actually went in January to start auditing their February year end. This allows you to pull in a balance as an interim value. You can do your materiality calculations, you can do your analyticals, all that sort of primary opening stuff in the file, get the audit going, but you don't yet have a final figure. But when you do get that final figure at the end of the audit, then you don't override the interim values. The interim values are still available on your lead sheets because you've done a number of procedures already on those values that are sitting at interim. And sometimes it would even be your inventory, your property, plant, and equipment. And all you do is look at the movements when you do the final audit. So that's what the interim is for. The transactional items, they are already available when you import as well. You can import monthly figures from month 1 to month 12, and that's excluding journals as well. So that would just be the movements from the general ledger from your client. So you can import the opening balance, which is literally the opening balance at the beginning of the year. All your income statement items are 0. Import the monthly movements, or you could group all the movements together into one column. Just pop it into month 12, for instance, and then that gives you a transactions column within your lead sheets, and then you would have your journals column from journals that you process into Draftworx. So all of that is already there, and if you need help just looking that up, please hop into our remote support, and I'm sure one of the ladies will just take you through where those things are sitting. The document reasons, Johan, if your reasons are short, document it straight on the working paper. You don't need to worry about creating a separate working paper to do so. The only time that I feel you need a separate working paper is if you start seeing, hang on, I want to write a page of information here. It's not going to fit neatly into the cell. Technically, Excel, you can use up to 32,000 characters within one cell. Now that is a lot of information. You're never going to need as much as that. But just think about that cell trying to stretch to 30,000 characters. It's just not going to work. So you decide. I mean, when you feel this is becoming untidy, then I would say copy it into a separate spreadsheet and create a hyperlink. It's going to make things look a little neater. All right, then just in terms of addressing audit methodologies, Audit Light, Audit Light Plus, and RAC, and then also what to choose. Now, Audit Light has been around for many years within Draftworx. However, we are not really supporting that methodology too much anymore, and it will be one that we actually will let fall away in the near future. It worked well, a lot of guys love it, and they'll continue to use it, and that's fine. But Audit Light requires you as the auditor to have a lot of knowledge of the audit standards. And you need to keep yourself up to date because, for instance, on fraud, I think there's one question in one of the documents about fraud in Audit Light, but that could be pages and pages of documentation that you need to put in there. Whereas with RAC, what we've tried to do is we've asked you a lot of questions. There could be a lot of stuff that you just say, you know what, this is not applicable. As a result, it's going to take you a little bit longer to put in those not applicables, but we counter that in RAC by saying a lot of those not applicables will actually roll forward to the next year when you roll forward the client, because it's going to be in these blue cells that you can document your knowledge of the business. So there's a trade-off there. We ask more questions. You're going to have to answer more questions in RAC than you would in Audit Lite, but with RAC you're going to be able to prove that you have considered, even if it's with the not applicable, you can prove you have considered the question. Then to fill the place of Audit Lite, because RAC is a premium product, we can't expect all our audit clients to go out and buy RAC as a separate product. We do need to give them a audit methodology, and that's where this new Audit Lite Plus fits in. Now, we have incorporated some of the working papers from RAC directly into Audit Lite Plus, and we've done that deliberately because we felt, listen, there are some documents where we just can't skimp on quality. What we have in RAC is great. We do need to use that. So, for instance, materiality is identical. The summary of identified misstatements is another one. It's identical in Audit Lite Plus as it is in RAC. However, with RAC, we bring in automation, which you don't have in Audit Lite Plus, and that's why RAC remains a premium product. With Audit Lite Plus, you can identify your risks, and there is a way of dealing with those risks. With RAC, we actually carry those risks forward for you to the next financial year. The way you document it, the controls you put in place to each of those risks carries over to the next financial year. The procedures you document for those risks are carried over. Your knowledge of the business is carried over to the next financial year. Even if we update the methodology, with Audit Lite Plus, you will need to redocument or copy and paste or use last year's working paper, but then it's not going to be updated to the latest templates each year. So that's the trade-off. We have to provide the users with a good solution, irrespective of whether you take RAC or not, and that's where Audit Lite Plus comes in, as I say, or RAC brings in the automation. One of the key things we've done with both of these methodologies is we are trying to focus more and more on risks. Risks are important. Risks are where you need to focus your audit attention. As we go through RAC, you'll see there's a point in time where we decide, you know what, this is a low-risk client, and we're actually going to get low assurance. So you can do minimal procedures on most of your audit. But where we find a risk, we want to make sure in RAC and with Audit Lite Plus that we actually go and do something proper about it. We want to make sure that you're covered at the end of the day. We go to great lengths in both methodologies to make sure that any procedures you select or the procedures that you select actually cover every single one of the assertions that you should be. With RAC, we go a step further and we even split the level of assurance in great detail. Once again, there's a little bit more work to do, but you know that you're covered at the end of the day. But there are various ways of speeding up the process that we're working on. Some have been implemented, some are nearly implemented, yeah, we're spending quite a lot of time in development with RAC still, just to keep it up to date. So if there are questions, queries, and ideas, improvements you'd like to see, please do let us know. A lot of what you see in Draftworx, and it's starting to become so with RAC as well, is due to user questions. We were asked a long time ago, where is RAC Micro? We've now introduced RAC Micro, and as we go through it, we'll show you how RAC Micro could be a way for you to do those very small audits still quite efficiently, but you're not having to chop and change between methodologies. And at the end of the day, Walter, maybe to answer your question, we would prefer that you choose a methodology, Audit Lite Plus or RAC, if you're going to choose one of ours. And the reason for that is it makes it easier for your firm. It improves your learning curve. You're not learning two methodologies, you're learning one methodology. And although there are similarities between the two, you're going to leverage the power of RAC more if you're using it more often than if you use it once or twice a year on one or two of your bigger clients. And that's why we've tried to put in these RAC micros to make it easier for these small engagements. However, once you've created a file, you can no longer choose between RAC and Audit Lite Plus. You do need to make that determination up front about which methodology you're going to choose. So there's no button inside RAC to go switch back to Audit Lite, for instance. That determination needs to be made up front. But For those who are already using Draftworx, I often say look at like a 2-year implementation. Do some of your big clients in year 1 and do the rest in year 2. Once you feel you are comfortable with the methodology, you don't want to waste time. Beautiful phrase yesterday from for one of our clients. You don't want to pay the school fees on a small engagement, a 10,000 Rand audit. You want to pay the school fees on a bigger audit, learn what the methodology is all about, and leverage it. And with a number of our clients, we say, listen, you're implementing RAC for the first time, send us the file. We'll gladly have a look at it for you, give you some comments. Walter, yes, RAC Micro is available. It's within the exact same RAC file, and I'll show you, it's going to be the first document we look at next week in terms of how you actually activate and start using RAC Micro. And as we go through, we'll show you just what it looks like at the end of the day. Okay, thanks Shane. There are our contact details. If you do want to get in touch with us, very important one there, support@dataprime.co.za, and also please remember our remote support. Office hours, we're there to help. We get quite a lot of queries on remote support. We peak at almost 100 connections a day with our users. Usually within 5 minutes we can sort you out online. There's no long waiting queue. If we are very busy, please give us a couple of minutes. We should usually just say, hi, we'll be with you in a moment. But the live interaction is quite nice. We do enjoy it. Yeah, if you need to ask some specific RAC questions, please give me a yell. Shane as well, he's there. If you do need to ask any questions, and if you're struggling to get hold of us, or if you want to just find out about sales or whatever the case might be, Shane, you can also get in touch with him, and I'm sure he will point you in the right direction if you're struggling anywhere. All right, Shane, I think that's about it. If there are any other questions or anything, also, guys, if you think of a question now, please email it through to us and we'll address it first thing in the next session, just so that we can keep everybody up to speed about what those questions are. I think it can be helpful for many people.
Leon, thanks very much, and thank you for your professionalism and just for all your preparation. It's amazing, and I think just what's indicative for me is that we've really gone over quite a bit of time here, and we've still got over 70 participants online who have stayed on. And so I wasn't actually going to do this poll now. I thought maybe we could do it next week, but I'm going to do it now in any case. It just follows on from what Leon was speaking about earlier. And guys, won't you just give us a bit of a feel for where are you at? Would you prefer an audit methodology personally yourself that has fewer questions and requires your audit knowledge to be up to date? Is that where would you prefer that, or would you prefer to go for more questions and then your audit knowledge doesn't have to be that up to date? In other words, the system kind of steers you through the process. Why don't you just give us a bit of a feel for that, please? It will be very helpful for us, and I know very helpful for Leon. It was just something that we were discussing yesterday. Leon, yeah, thanks so much for everything, man, and fantastic. Looking forward to working with you again and the whole team next week, same time, same place.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that. And yeah, we'll keep working through. And just as a last note, as I said, we'll get this recording up as soon as we can. But what we also will be doing in the long run is we're going to create a separate video for each working paper within RAC, and actually going to start incorporate a hyperlink on each document, and it's actually going to be this webinar recording that we'll use. So if you're getting stuck on a document, you're going to be able to click a hyperlink. It's going to take you straight to the YouTube video, just to help you out on each individual document. As our user base grows, it becomes more and more necessary for us to just tweak and improve on our options in terms of getting help.
Thanks, Leon. Just so that the guys know, I wasn't kidding. You can hear I'm at the airport. There we go. How was that? On cue. Yeah, guys, if anybody, Leon, thanks a lot. I know you've got other stuff happening in that, and that's great. And anybody who needs to run, that's fine. If anybody wants to chat, though, if you want to just test, even if it's just test your mic and just say, how's it, guys? Everybody will hear you in the meeting room. All you need to do is put your hand up. we can actually offer this as a, not today I don't think, but next week if you want to ask questions by way of using the microphone. That's another way that we can do this. All you need to do is put your hand up. Your hand, we're not going to see you if you raise your hand in your office there. You have to actually do use the hand below the red arrow, which you will see on the right-hand side of your screen. So if anybody puts their hand up now, I will cross over to you immediately and just unmute your mic and you can say, how's it to the guys? Otherwise, all that remains for me to say is enjoy your weekend. And thanks for all the positive feedback that's coming through. Baie dankie Kobus, lekker dag en geniet die naweek. And yeah, great to have you guys all online. I don't think anybody wants to chat, and that's absolutely fine. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Leon. All the best. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, and you, Shane.
Thanks, Leon. Cheers.
Cheers.